Let's talk about something you might not think about when you look at your dinner plate. Who owns the food? And I don't mean the farmer or the supermarket. I mean, who owns the actual seed it all came from? We're about to dive into a huge global power shift that all starts with that tiny little seed, and it affects every single one of us.
So, who actually owns the seeds that feed the world? If you'd asked that question a few decades ago, people would have looked at you funny. It's like asking who owns the air we breathe. Seeds were just a shared heritage, passed down from one farmer to the next for generations. But today, that's not a philosophical question at all. It's one of the biggest legal and economic fights happening in agriculture right now. So, what changed? Well, it was a single agreement from the World Trade Organization, the WTO. It's called TRIPS. And you can think of it as a brand new global rulebook for ideas. And it said something pretty radical. For the first time, you could legally own a life form, like a new type of corn, the same way you own the patent to a new smartphone. And just like that, thousands of years of farming rules were totally rewritten.
I mean, you can see the difference right here. We went from the old way, where seeds were a common good you'd save from your harvest and share with your neighbor, to the new rule, where that same seed is now a protected private asset. It's locked down, and now you often have to get permission and pay a royalty just to plant it.
Now, TRIPS did have a little bit of wiggle room. It didn't force every country to adopt the exact same patent system for plants. Instead, it said they had to create an effective sui generis system. It's just a fancy Latin phrase that means of its own kind. So basically, every country had to design its own custom-fit legal framework to protect plant varieties. How they did it was flexible, but the fact that they had to do it, that was not optional. But here's the thing. When you create a rule book that big, you're going to create some friction. This new system of ownership kicks off some really fundamental conflicts out in the real world, for farmers, for countries, and for the future of our food. The source material we're looking at highlights three major battlegrounds. First up, you have this constant tug of war between the public's need for food and private corporate control. Then there's a clash between the big, chemical-heavy industrial farming model and more sustainable methods. And finally, you have the massive risk of relying on just a few crops, that's monoculture, versus the incredible safety net that biodiversity gives us. So let's dig into that first one. This really gets right to the heart of it. On one side of the scale, you've got a basic human need, food security, making sure everyone has enough to eat, which means you need widespread access to seeds. But on the other side, you've got private control, which works by restricting access through patents and royalties to make a profit. These two things are pulling in completely opposite directions. You just can't maximize both at the same time. Next up, it's a clash of philosophies. In one corner, you have the dominant model of agriculture. Think lab coats, corporate R&D, and lots of chemicals. But it's a model that's starting to show its limits, with productivity declining in some areas. And in the other corner, you have thousands and thousands of innovations from farmers themselves. Sustainable, local solutions that are totally brilliant, but are completely invisible to the formal patent system. And this leads us to that third big tension. The whole system encourages creating a few blockbuster seeds, which pushes farmers towards monoculture. Those endless fields of the exact same corn plant as far as the eye can see. Sure, it's efficient, but it is incredibly risky. One new disease could wipe out the entire harvest. The alternative? Biodiversity. That's nature's ultimate insurance policy. Variety is what gives our food system the strength to survive shocks. So when we talk about private control, what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like this. Just 10 companies control 85% of the entire global pesticide market and nearly a third of the commercial seed market. This isn't just business as usual. It's a huge concentration of power over the very foundation of how we feed ourselves. Okay, these conflicts feel massive, almost impossible to solve. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. The source material argues that a country like India shouldn't just be on the defense against these global rules. It argues that India has its own secret weapon to unleash. It's huge and often overlooked, library of knowledge. This quote from the author Anil K. Gupta just says it all perfectly. He's making the case that India needs to stop seeing itself as just a buyer of technology from other countries. It's sitting on a massive, untapped goldmine of its own intellectual property. It's time to change the perspective and go on the offensive. And this isn't just a nice theory either. There's proof. An amazing organization called the Honeybee Network has actually gone out and documented over 10,000 of these grassroots innovations. We're talking about real inventions, real farming practices developed by local communities, a giant library of intellectual property that the global patent system has basically pretended doesn't exist.
So, how do you take this incredible library of knowledge and turn it into an actual strategy? The source lays out a whole new playbook for India. It's a three-pronged approach to build a future that's both competitive on the world stage and sustainable at home. First things first, you have to rewrite the rules at home. And this proposed law is radically different from what you see in most places. I mean, look at this. It explicitly protects a farmer's right to save, use, and even sell their own seeds, the very thing the global system tries to stop. It even creates a national gene fund. That's a way to share the profits from commercial seeds back with the communities who gave us the original genetic material in the first place. It's all about building a fair system from the ground up.
Second, India can take this exact same philosophy to the WTO negotiations. The strategy is pretty simple. Demand fairness. If a company wants to use genetic material from India in their new seed, great, but they have to say where they got it from. It's also about creating a global registry for these grassroots green innovations, giving them the same kind of respect and protection that we give to, say, French wines or Swiss watches. So how do you pay for all of this? The system they propose is actually really clever because it's self-sustaining. You take a tiny tax from produce sold at big commercial markets, combine that with royalties from seed companies, and all that money flows into the gene fund we talked about. Then, that money gets paid out to reward the farmers who are doing the vital work of preserving all the traditional crop varieties that are the foundation for all future innovation. It's a closed loop.
Now, right as these battle lines are being drawn, a whole new technology comes along that just pours gasoline on the fire. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. They take every single one of these questions about ownership, control, and especially safety, and they crank the dial up to 11.
You see, with GMOs, we're not just crossbreeding plants anymore. We're changing their fundamental DNA. Now, the source material isn't saying that this is inherently bad. What it is saying is that it introduces a whole new level of complexity and risk. And if you're going to have a global market for these organisms, you absolutely need a strong, internationally agreed-upon set of safety rules.
And scientists have pretty much mapped out how things could potentially go wrong. It's like a chain reaction. Step 1, a new gene gets incorporated. Step 2, it gets released into the environment. Step 3, it has to survive and multiply. Step 4, it comes into contact with other species. And Step 5, it could potentially cause harm. The key to prevention is understanding every link in that chain and having safety checks at each and every step. So to manage these new risks, the source argues for a clear set of safety rules. This is about common sense things, like mandating clear labels so consumers can choose what they buy. It's about requiring prior informed consent, basically getting a farmer's permission before doing trials on their land. And it's about restricting the most controversial technologies, like the Terminator gene, which creates seeds that go sterile after one harvest, forcing farmers to buy new ones every single year.
Which brings us right back to the central dilemma. Look, this isn't about being anti-technology. It's about building a global food system that encourages incredible innovation while also protecting our environment, ensuring fairness for farmers, and making sure that all of us have safe, secure food to eat. At the end of the day,